Berlin was not just a city. It was a wound carved into two halves, pulsing with suspicion and fear. Here, the Cold War wasn't abstract policy. It was watchtowers, divided families, and whispers in back alleys. The movies set in this crucible reflect a world where truth was fragile and loyalty lethal. These are 12 Cold War Berlin thrillers that nail the tension. The Spy Who Came In From the Cold, 1965. When The Spy Who Came In From the Cold hit theaters in 1965, audiences expecting another slick James Bond adventure were blindsided. Instead, they encountered Richard Burton as Alec Leamas, an aging, bitter spy drowning in whiskey and self-loathing, a man ground down by a profession that offered no glory. Adapted from John le Carré's seminal novel, the film became the antithesis of the glamorous spy fantasy dominating the decade. Shot in stark black and white, Martin Ritt's direction stripped away every shred of romance from espionage. The Berlin Wall loomed like a character itself, a symbol of hopeless division. Burton's weary performance earned him an Academy Award nomination, though insiders whispered that his real-life cynicism and alcoholism bled seamlessly into the role. Burton himself admitted the film mirrored his own disillusionment with politics and power. Behind the scenes, filming in authentic Berlin locations proved difficult. Crews worked under heavy restrictions, and tensions between East and West meant even simulated spy scenes could trigger suspicion. Still, the atmosphere of Berlin's bleak streets and barbed wire gave the film its authenticity. Critics praised its honesty, with the New York Times calling it the thinking man's spy thriller. Unlike Bond's world of martinis and Aston Martins, The Spy Who Came In From the Cold offered only betrayal, futility, and the crushing realization that in espionage, no one ever truly wins. The film shocked audiences with its brutal ending, where loyalty and love dissolve in the fog of political manipulation. To this day, it remains a definitive Cold War statement, a haunting reminder that the greatest casualty of Berlin's shadow games was hope itself. Funeral in Berlin, 1966. After the unexpected success of the Ipcress file, audiences clamored for more of Michael Caine's bespectacled anti-hero, Harry Palmer. Unlike James Bond, Palmer was no dashing ladies' man or tuxedoed gambler. He was working class, sardonic, and perpetually weary, an everyman spy caught in the machinery of governments that valued him less than the intelligence he gathered. Funeral in Berlin, released in 1966, took him straight to the heart of Cold War paranoia. What made the film stand out was its authenticity. Rather than studio backlots, the production shot on location, capturing the ominous landscape of divided Berlin. Checkpoint Charlie appears on screen, complete with looming guard towers and ominous barbed wire, lending the film an immediacy that few thrillers of the time could. Claim reports from set suggest that filming near the wall was fraught with unease. East German guards watched closely, and security officers worried that cameras pointed in the wrong direction could provoke international incident. The story itself centered on a high-ranking Soviet officer seeking to defect, with Palmer stuck in the middle of double crosses that blurred the line between friend and foe. Unlike Bond, Palmer lacked resources or certainty. His strength was his skepticism and his constant awareness that betrayal lurked behind every handshake. Critics were split on the film's pacing. Some dismissed it as slow compared to Bond's explosive set pieces, while others admired its deliberate, tension-filled rhythm. Over time, the latter view prevailed, and Funeral in Berlin grew into a cult classic, celebrated for its grim realism and Caine's sharp performance. In the end, the movie captured the unsettling truth of Cold War Berlin. The glamour belonged to fiction, but the danger was all too real. Every alley could hide an informant, every promise could mask a trap, and survival depended on knowing that loyalty was the rarest currency of all. Torn Curtain, 1966. By the mid-1960s, Alfred Hitchcock was a legend, and when he turned his attention to Cold War Berlin, expectations soared. Torn Curtain, starring Paul Newman and Julie Andrews, promised a prestige spy thriller, but what emerged was one of Hitchcock's most troubled productions, an uneasy blend of studio politics, clashing egos, and a director pushing against the limits of his own formula. From the beginning, Hitchcock and Newman clashed. Newman, at the height of his fame, wanted depth and psychological realism in his role as an American scientist pretending to defect to East Germany. Hitchcock, notorious for seeing actors as cattle, bristled at Newman's endless questions. Their tension spilled onto the set, with Julie Andrews, fresh from The Sound of Music, caught uncomfortably between two titans. The film's most notorious sequence, however, is pure Hitchcock, the brutal, drawn-out killing of an East German agent. Hitchcock wanted to depict how hard it really was to kill a man, with every gasp, thrash, and struggle rendered painfully real. Audiences were stunned, and critics remained divided on whether the scene is genius or indulgence. Filming posed logistical nightmares. Berlin access was restricted, forcing Hitchcock to recreate much of the city on Universal backlots and to use Copenhagen for key sequences. The result, some critics felt, lacked authenticity. Upon release, reviews were mixed. Some called it slow and unsatisfying, others admired its darkness and moral ambiguity. In retrospect, though, Torn Curtain feels prophetic. Its messy, uneasy tone reflects the true nature of Cold War espionage. No clarity, no clean victories, only compromises that left everyone bruised. It's not Hitchcock's best film, but it is one of his most unsettling, capturing the paranoia of divided Berlin through a lens of mistrust and quiet horror. The Quiller Memorandum, 1966. Among the many Berlin thrillers of the 1960s, The Quiller Memorandum stands apart for its cerebral chill. Adapted from Elliston Trevor's novel and scripted by Harold Pinter, the film eschewed Bond-style glamour for slow-burn tension and razor-sharp dialogue. George Segal starred as Quiller, an American agent navigating not just Cold War espionage, but the unsettling rise of neo-Nazi movements in Berlin's underground. This wasn't the standard East versus West spy game. Instead, it tackled the uncomfortable reality that even as Berlin was split by the wall, the ghosts of the Third Reich still stalked its streets. Director Michael Anderson shot the film amid Berlin's modernist architecture and stark ruins, using the city itself as a metaphor for ideological decay. Critics at the time were divided. Some complained the film was too talk-heavy, lacking the fireworks of more conventional spy thrillers. Others praised its restraint, its willingness to use silence and ambiguity as weapons. John Barry's haunting score, so different from his soaring Bond themes, layered the film with an atmosphere of dread. Behind the scenes, Harold Pinter's involvement shaped the film's distinct tone. His dialogue, often oblique and unsettling, gave the story a sense of unease that mirrored Berlin's fractured identity. Over the years, the film's reputation has grown, with many modern critics recognizing it as ahead of its time, a spy thriller that rejected glamour for something far more sinister. What makes the Quiller Memorandum endure is its sense of nihilism. It presents a world where ideology, morality, and loyalty are fragile, where survival requires compromise, and where the past refuses to die. In showing Berlin not just as a battlefield for superpowers, but as a haunted city still wrestling with its own demons, it carved out a space in cinema history as one of the most unsettling thrillers of the era. The Defector, 1966, Montgomery Clift's final film, The Defector, is remembered as much for its tragic behind-the-scenes story as for the Cold War paranoia it tried to capture. Released in 1966, it cast Clift as Professor James Bauer, an American physicist reluctantly drawn into espionage in West Germany and East Berlin. By then, Clift was frail and haunted, years past the accident and addictions that had ravaged his health. Watching him on screen, audiences sensed a man who mirrored his character's exhaustion with life and loyalty. The film was shot partially in Berlin, with real locations adding an authenticity that echoed its bleak narrative. Unlike the stylized thrillers of the time, The Defector leaned heavily into realism, portraying espionage as coercion rather than choice. Its story centered on an unwilling pawn, a man who found himself trapped between ruthless handlers, ambiguous morality, and the chilling machinery of Cold War intelligence. Production was fraught with tension. Cliff's health worried producers who hired emergency medical staff on set. Rumors swirled that director Raul Levy grew frustrated with Cliff's fragile state, though some co-stars remembered him as deeply committed to the role. Tragically, Cliff died only months after filming wrapped, cementing the defector as a haunting farewell. Critical reception was muted. Some praised Cliff's raw, vulnerable performance, while others dismissed the film as slow and somber compared to flashier spy adventures. Yet over time, the movie has gained a cult following, seen as a rare portrait of espionage stripped of heroism. It dared to show spies not as martini-sipping adventurers, but as human beings broken under unbearable weight. The Defector stands today as both a Cold War relic and a poignant elegy for one of Hollywood's most gifted actors. Watching it feels less like entertainment and more like eavesdropping on a man's final confession. Tired, uncertain, and painfully real. A Dandy in Aspic, 1968. When A Dandy in Aspic premiered in 1968, it carried a unique burden. Its director, Anthony Mann, died during production. The film was completed by its star, Lawrence Harvey, making it both an espionage thriller and a testament to artistic struggle. Set against the paranoia of divided Berlin, the film follows a British double agent tasked with hunting down himself. The concept alone was dripping with Cold War irony, a spy caught in a spiral of deception torn between duty and identity. Harvey's performance mirrored his own off-screen exhaustion, while Mia Farrow, fresh from Rosemary's Baby, added an ethereal, uneasy charm as the enigmatic love interest. The film used Berlin's streets and checkpoints with almost documentary precision, grounding its surreal story in the brutal reality of the wall. Production, however, was plagued by tension. Harvey's dual role as star and stand-in director created friction with cast and crew, and critics later noted the uneven tone as evidence of a vision cut short. Upon release, reviews were harsh. Many felt the pacing dragged, and the story was too convoluted for mainstream audiences. Yet decades later, the film has been reappraised as an overlooked gem, a work that dared to show espionage not as adventure, but as a hall of mirrors in which even the self cannot be trusted. Its title, borrowed from a phrase meaning "a man trapped in jelly," encapsulated Cold War Berlin perfectly. A city suspended, unable to move, caught between two powers. Today, A Dandy in Aspic resonates less as a conventional thriller and more as a metaphor for a divided world where even survival could feel like entrapment. The Looking Glass War, 1970. Based on another John le Carré novel, The Looking Glass War offered audiences something few thrillers dared: the complete failure of espionage. Released in 1970, it told the story of a young, inexperienced agent sent into East Germany on a doomed mission. Unlike glamorous spy tales, this one ends not with triumph, but with futility and death. Director Frank Pearson leaned into the bleakness of le Carré's vision, crafting a film that was deliberately uncomfortable. The mission is underfunded, poorly planned, and doomed from the start, an allegory for how Western intelligence agencies often treated operatives as expendable. Christopher Jones played the young spy, and his naive charm only made the inevitable conclusion more heartbreaking. Anthony Hopkins, then still emerging in his career, provided a chilling counterpoint as a weary intelligence officer watching events collapse. Behind the scenes, the production sought to emphasize authenticity over spectacle. Sets were sparse, the tone subdued, and Berlin itself presented as drab rather than glamorous. Critics, however, were divided. Many found the film too grim, too slow, and too unrelenting compared to the escapism audiences craved. Box office numbers were disappointing, and the movie slipped into semi-obscurity. Yet in retrospect, The Looking Glass War is strikingly prophetic. It foresaw the disillusionment of the 1970s, when spy scandals and real-world betrayals shattered illusions of honor. Today, it's often recognized as one of the most brutally honest portrayals of espionage, where young lives were squandered for information of questionable value. In its quiet tragedy, the film captures the soul of Cold War Berlin. No victories, only losses measured in silence. The Odessa File, 1974. By the mid-1970s, audiences were shifting from Cold War spy tales to thrillers grappling with Nazi legacies. The Odessa File, based on Frederick Forsyth's bestseller, bridged both worlds. Released in 1974, it stars Jon Voight as a journalist in West Germany who uncovers a secret network of former SS officers, the notorious Odessa, operating within the shadows of a divided Europe. What makes the film so gripping is its collision of past and present. While Berlin remains haunted by Cold War divisions, the story reminds viewers that beneath those tensions lay older, darker ghosts. The narrative mixes spy thriller mechanics with investigative drama as Voight's character unravels a conspiracy stretching from post-war Germany to Egypt, where Odessa plots to rebuild Nazi influence. Filming took place in authentic German locations, with producers working carefully to navigate sensitivities about lingering Nazi sympathies. Director Ronald Neame insisted on grounding the suspense in realism rather than sensationalism, a choice that lent the film a somber, almost journalistic tone. Andrew Lloyd Webber, still early in his career, even composed the haunting theme song Christmas Dream for the film, giving it an unusual cultural resonance. Critical response was mixed. Some reviewers praised the film's intelligence and moral weight, while others dismissed it as too grim. Yet audiences responded strongly, and it became a modest hit, capitalizing on Forsyth's reputation for intricate, politically charged thrillers. The Odessa File stands as a reminder that Berlin was not only a Cold War battleground, but also a city scarred by its Nazi past. In exposing the survival of old evils beneath new conflicts, the film reinforced a sobering truth. History never stays buried. It waits, festering, ready to re-emerge when vigilance lapses. The Tamarind Seed, 1974. By the mid-1970s, audiences were hungry for spy thrillers that blended Cold War tension with human intimacy. The Tamarind Seed, directed by Blake Edwards, gave them exactly that. Julie Andrews starred as Judith Farrow, a British civil servant scarred by a failed love affair who meets Omar Sharif's Soviet attaché in Barbados. But soon, their romance pulls them into the shadowy world of East-West espionage, culminating in tense sequences set in divided Berlin. The film took critics by surprise. Edwards, best known for comedy hits like The Pink Panther, traded slapstick for suspense. His meticulous pacing built unease, as audiences questioned whether Sharif's character truly loved Andrews, or whether she was being used as a pawn by the KGB. This blending of personal vulnerability with political intrigue set the Tamarind Seed apart. Behind the scenes, Andrews admitted she relished the chance to play a more serious, mature role after years of family-friendly musicals. Sharif, already a global icon, brought a world-weary elegance that perfectly matched the script's ambiguity. Filming in Berlin added authenticity, with the wall looming over key sequences like a silent accuser. Upon release, critics were divided. Some praised its mix of romance and espionage, while others dismissed it as too slow compared to Bond's extravaganzas. But audiences appreciated its blend of glamour, suspense, and melancholy. Its themes, trust, betrayal, the impossibility of love across ideological divides, spoke directly to a generation weary of Cold War stalemates. Today, The Tamarind Seed feels like a forgotten gem, part spy thriller, part tragic love story. It reminds us that in Cold War Berlin, even matters of the heart were political, and love itself could become the deadliest gamble of all. The Soldier, 1982. By the 1980s, Cold War thrillers shifted toward action-driven narratives, but some films still captured the old Berlin paranoia. The Soldier, directed by James Glickenhaus, was one such attempt, a pulpy, violent spy story about a renegade CIA agent trying to stop terrorists from plunging the superpowers into nuclear war. Though much of the movie veered into shootouts and car chases, its Berlin sequences brought audiences back to the grim heart of espionage. The film opens with ruthless terrorists seizing a nuclear weapon and quickly escalates into a world where U.S. and Soviet operatives must navigate shifting alliances. Ken Wall, in the title role, plays a hardened operative who trusts no one, a fitting archetype for Cold War Berlin. The wall itself becomes a backdrop to betrayal, with shots of checkpoints and shadowy meetings reminding audiences that Berlin was still the global epicenter of espionage. Behind the scenes, The Soldier was a low-budget project, but director Glickenhaus insisted on shooting real European locations to give it credibility. Production faced difficulties, with security restrictions around the wall limiting what could be filmed. Crews had to stage sequences quickly to avoid drawing too much attention from East German guards. Critical response was harsh. Reviewers derided the film as overly violent and thinly plotted, especially compared to Le Carré's cerebral adaptations. Yet despite its flaws, The Soldier found a cult following. For some, its pulpy energy and gritty Berlin setting captured the paranoia of the era in a raw, unfiltered way. Decades later, the film stands as a reminder that not every Cold War thriller was polished or elegant. Some reflected the chaos, the urgency, and the violence of a time when the world seemed perpetually on the edge of disaster. Berlin, in The Soldier, is not just a city. It's the fuse on a ticking bomb. The Russia House, 1990. As the Cold War neared its end, The Russia House offered one of the last great spy dramas rooted in its fading tensions. Adapted from John le Carré's 1989 novel, the 1990 film starred Sean Connery as Barley Blair, a disheveled, jazz-loving publisher who stumbles into espionage when handed a secret Soviet manuscript. Much of the story unfolds across Moscow, but Berlin provides the crucial backdrop for its shifting allegiances and betrayals. This wasn't Connery as James Bond, it was Connery unvarnished, older, weary, and far more human. His character's cynicism and reluctant involvement in espionage made the film a poignant farewell to the spy genre that had once made him a star. Michelle Pfeiffer, playing a Soviet woman caught between loyalty and love, delivered a performance of quiet strength, giving the film an emotional gravity rare for its genre. Behind the scenes, The Russia House broke new ground. It was the first major U.S. film to shoot extensively in the Soviet Union, with the Kremlin granting permission for filming at previously off-limits locations. Berlin was used as a narrative crossroads, symbolizing the fragile trust and uncertainty of a world in transition. The production's unprecedented access became a symbol of glasnost itself, marking cinema's role in bridging divides. Critics praised the film's intelligence and emotional depth, though some felt its slower pace limited mainstream appeal. For Le Carré fans, however, it was a triumph. A faithful adaptation that understood espionage as a story not of guns and gadgets, but of people trapped in moral compromise. Looking back, The Russia House now feels like a farewell note to Cold War Berlin. As the wall fell, the city's role as the world's greatest chessboard faded. The film captures that twilight moment perfectly, a story of secrets unraveling just as history itself was changing forever. The Lives of Others, 2006. Although released long after the Cold War ended, The Lives of Others is perhaps the definitive film about its lingering shadow. Set in 1984 East Berlin, the German-language masterpiece follows Captain Gerd Wiesler, a Stasi officer assigned to spy on a playwright suspected of disloyalty. What begins as surveillance turns into a haunting exploration of conscience, loyalty, and humanity within an oppressive system. Director Florian Henkel von Donnersmarck meticulously recreated East Berlin in chilling detail. The drab apartments, the oppressive offices, the sense that microphones hid in every crack. Ulrich Mue's performance as Wiesler is heartbreaking, a loyal servant of the state whose slow awakening to morality costs him everything. The film shows the suffocating paranoia of a regime where trust could destroy you and silence was survival. Behind the scenes, Mue himself had lived under Stasi scrutiny, making his portrayal deeply personal. Production unearthed real surveillance equipment and files, grounding the film in terrifying authenticity. Audiences around the world were stunned. Here was not a flashy spy thriller, but a meditation on the human soul under tyranny. The film won the Academy Award for Best Foreign Language Film in 2007, cementing its reputation as a modern classic. More importantly, it reignited discussions in Germany about the wounds of surveillance and betrayal that still lingered after reunification. Though not made during the Cold War, The Lives of Others distills its essence more powerfully than any film before it. It reminds us that Berlin's true drama was not just geopolitics, but the quiet tragedies of ordinary lives crushed between ideologies. Its final message is devastating yet redemptive. Even in a world of walls and wiretaps, compassion can survive. From Burton's weary spy in The Spy Who Came In From the Cold to Mu's haunting Stasi officer in The Lives of Others, these films reveal Berlin as more than a city. It was the beating heart of Cold War fear. Which Berlin thriller still chills you? Comment below and don't forget to like and subscribe.